네, 김상철 대표께서 서울시 안심.
Thank you very much, President Kim, for your presentation. He provided an overview of the SSIP and results of the baseline survey. So we will go on to the discussion, and the first discussant is Professor Heikki Hiilamo, the first presenter of the first session, and three other discussants.
Hello.
Professor Hiilamo?
Good to see you. So
thank you for excellent presentations, I'm very impressed by this project for two reasons. One is that this is really a unique approach to guaranteed minimum income. As was discussed in the first presentation, this is something different from a negative income tax. It's different from universal basic income, and it's also different from just expansion of the current system. So this is something new. And then, since this is a new idea, it's very interesting that you are carrying out a pilot on that idea. I think that universal basic income is a very strong political idea, but it's not very pragmatic. So it hasn't been implemented anywhere else. Well, we can discuss whether there is universal basic income in Alaska or in Iran, but those are quite marginal projects. So what do we need to think about is to have a more practical approach to guaranteeing minimum income for low-income households, and safety income is definitely a new idea. So you have this idea, and now you're also testing the idea through this pilot. And I'm also very impressed by the research design of the pilot and the fact that you are having so many different measures of success. You're not just looking at employment, you're also looking at health, housing conditions, subjective well-being, sense of isolation, satisfaction with life. So a number of different outcomes, and it's very important to look at the subjective outcomes in addition to those kind of hard economic measures as income. Well, my only concern with the project is, or the pilot is, that the experiment group is fairly small, just 500 households on two different income levels, and that's a small concern. So it might not be possible to have statistically significant results for subgroups among those in the treatment group. But overall, I'm very much looking forward to see the results, and I agree with the professor's presentation that this is a unique idea which has international interest. So I'm sure there will be international attention to the results from this pilot. And I congratulate you for a very interesting project, and I wish you all the success in completing the pilot. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Heikki Hiilamo, for brief discussion. Now we'll move to Korean discussants.
So after the Korean discussant, for those of you who are joining us here at the venue and joining us virtually, you also have an opportunity to ask questions. And if you are watching us via YouTube, please leave us your question. Then we'll try to get your questions to our discussants. So the second discussant from Korea is Hoyoung. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Hoyoung from the Korea Research Institute for Vocational Education and Training. It is a great honor to take part in this panel discussion. I would like to talk about three things. So the first thing I would like to talk about is we talk about basic income and compare this with the safety income. So for basic income, I have to think about whether we can actually feasibly implement this when we think about the financial resources we have. So basically, you would need 1 million won per person. Then you also have to think about how this would work together with the existing welfare system. But you think about a budget, then you would need a budget of about 600 trillion won. So I think financing this program might be a bit difficult. So if you give about 50,000, 300,000 won as basic income, then you would have your existing welfare system, and all the limitations or problems of the existing welfare system would not be addressed with only 500,000 or 300 won in basic income. In Switzerland, they gave 3 million won in basic income, and they had a referendum, but because of a lot of issues, the referendum did not pass. And then the second thing I would like to talk about is Professor Park mentioned this, and through data analysis, as he showed in his presentation, you have the existing welfare system, and there's a lot of limitations and issues with the existing welfare system. And I believe the problem starts with the fact that they have opportunity to work, but some people, couldn't work, and so the program was for them. And currently, I think the risk that we face is a little bit different. The nature of the risk has changed. So the existing welfare system, how do we improve it, is an issue or a challenge that we are facing. And so I think that safety income might be a stepping stone, and basic income might be our final goal when we actually have a more advanced economy in place. And then with regard to negative income tax and safety income, if you look at negative income tax, you have to change the tax system, and basically you have to completely overhaul the basic livelihood security system. So that might not be possible. But the safety income system actually doesn't overhaul the tax system, but at the same time, you can also use the existing welfare system. So I think it's a very realistic alternative that we have. And I have questions and comments for the two presenters. For Mr. Kim, so you shared with us a lot of data, and it seems that you're systematically producing this data. So is there data that can compare existing welfare system to the safety income program? Then I think if we can compare, we can find ways to improve the safety income project, SSIP. And for Professor Park, in your presentation, I think there's a difference between SSIP and some of the programs, SI. So how do you view SSIP as someone who has done research on SI?
Next, we will be hearing from Professor Soondool Chung from Ewha Women's University. Listening to the two presentations today, I realize that SSIP is meaningful, that it seeks a new welfare system, and that it's an innovative welfare system. And I would like to talk about the evidence-based research. So when we determine whether a policy is effective or not, we need to have evidence on this. That's a very important starting point. As we carry out this experiment on SSIP, we will be accumulating various outcomes and results to determine whether we will adopt this as a policy for our country. And in that sense, I believe that this experiment is extremely important. There was a lot of discussion on this about setting up the data and building up the data. This will be a major challenge for us, in particular regarding Dr. Park's presentation on tracking the economic effects in for example, in unemployment rates and so forth. I think it's important for us to verify such economic effects. And in terms of the design of the experiment, how are we going to evaluate the results and the outcomes? This is an important challenge for us. And Dr. Kim talked about 7 areas: labor, household, education, housing, and social relationship, satisfaction of life, and training, education, and financial situation, labor and employment. And just because SI has been provided, can really there be effect on all 7 areas? Of course, there might be indirect effects, even if they are not direct impacts. Then we will have to think about what the direct impact is. And we need to see if the purpose is to reduce poverty or the poverty rate or to increase labor market participation. We have to have a thorough consensus on this, and we need to come up with some representative indexes to assess the outcome. And of course, if quantitative assessment cannot explain the entire picture, then there has to be qualitative indexes too. We talked about human dignity. We heard about human dignity, and for us to maintain human dignity, what needs to be drawn out from this experiment? This is another area that we need to think about. And one other point is that the 500 households that are included in this group, 100 of them are older than 65 years old. However, in the case of these older members who are participating, due to their age, they will be discriminated in the labor market. So there can be differences in the characteristics of the outcome due to their different ages and different situations. I know that there were some groupings by age, but we need to think about other ways to group these members of the experiment. And after the safety income is received, there will be positive results. However, also we need to think about whether they are making rational and logical consumption. So we need to assess the consumption pattern of the recipients, and I understand that this is included in the index, but it is included in one of the indexes. Therefore, it is not explicit, although it is implicitly put in the indexes. That's all for me.
Thank you very much, Professor Soondool. And next, last but not least, we'd like to invite Professor Kyung-zoon from Sungkyunkwan University. Hello, everyone. I am Kyung-zoon, professor at Sungkyunkwan University. First, I would like to say that I'm very grateful to be attending the Seoul International Forum on Safety Income 2022. I would like to thank Mayor Oh for organizing a great forum like this. And I would like to also thank the government officials at Seoul Metropolitan City who are in charge of welfare here in Seoul. So we're talking about the SSIP, which is an alternative guaranteed income project for those living in poverty in Korea. So I think we were able to learn a lot from the 2 presenters, and they provided us with a lot of meaningful information. So if you look at guaranteed income, there's so many different programs in Korea. We have basic pension, pension for the disabled, public assistance such as work and child subsidy, MBLS, industrial accident insurance, public pension, employment insurance. So in Korea, there are many different types of programs, and the social security system, it consists of all of these different programs. And after the 1990s, the social welfare system developed and made a quite contribution to alleviating poverty and inequality in Korea. But in 2000, there was the tragic incident in Songpa. In August, in Suwon, and a few weeks ago in Shincheon, there was a tragic incident. So even today, we see that there are blind spots. And as we make the transition to a knowledge society, there are huge disruptions in the labor market. And all of these challenges calls for innovation in the Korean income security system. So I've expressed the idea that basic income or negative income tax proposals are not suitable as an innovative plan for the Korean income security system, especially as an alternative income security system for the poor. And I've shared my thoughts at various seminars, discussions, and media interviews. I mean, there are many reasons to this, but a single program cannot replace the income security systems, which is a combination of programs and institutions with various goals targeting various population groups. So again, you cannot just have a single program replacing all of these different programs. And second, I think I've stressed that the income security system for the poor should be based on proper income wealth test. And at the same time, it should be based on household, so household unit protection. And Professor Park proposed the safe income system in 2016, and there are no other conditions than the income level in reviewing the eligibility, determining the eligibility of recipients. So, and if you look in the presentation, it's about support first and settlement later. So we have to, I believe that the program realizes differentiated welfare moving beyond the extremes of selective and universal welfare society corresponds to the alternative income security system that I think is suitable. And so, moreover, it seems that this proposal is more desirable and that it is implemented as a pilot project of SSIP, realizing the desires of social policy researchers to implement policies based on performance evaluation. So although there will be formidable difficulties in the process and considerable effort will be required, I hope that the outcomes will spread to the national level, moving beyond the Seoul metropolitan government level. And if I'm offered to some ideas for further discussion, the current systems, self-support assistance, conditional eligibility, and income deductions should be considered in estimating the effect of undermining work motivation. So we think we have to look at, whether the current programs might undermine work motivation, and then if you look at the second presentation, it is necessarily to closely review whether it is possible to compare with the recipients of the current system, which is the National Basic Livelihood Security System. So we have to see whether we can compare the beneficiaries of MBLSS and SSIP. So I think maybe next year, this is something that you can look into. Thank you.
네.
Thank you very much. Then we heard the comments and questions from the discussants. We will now invite the speakers, the presenters, to answer the questions that were asked to them. And after we hear from the two presenters, we will, if we have time, let the discussants and also participants and those participating via YouTube to make their comments or ask questions. First, I want to thank Professor Hiilamo. I said that it's different from NIT, and I have been arguing that it is different from NIT, but many people just say that it's a slight modification of NIT, and he said that it's something new, it's a new idea, and I would like to thank him for that comment. I think it's a different, that it's different. It's a new idea. So there is a system in which we have the current system and it's maintained. We don't have a means test. It is supported first and then settled later on. And this is a new idea, and that is why I think that it should be assessed as a new idea. And Professor Hiilamo said that it's only 500 households, but it will be increased to 1,000 and 100. So 1,600 will be a treatment group, and a double of that will be the control group. So 1,600 will be the target, and 3,200 as the control. And next, Dr. O talked about SSIP and SI. And so what is the difference between SSIP and SI? So there is a difference in that the asset is viewed. There's no means test. So in assets, those who are self-employed or the presidents who are actually operating a company that's almost bankrupt, they don't have any income, but they have a car and they have a house, but they commit suicide because of their dire financial situation. So that is why we should first support and then settle later on. So we should not have suicides due to financial situation. And those, excluding those, for example, who are living in the most expensive apartment in Korea. The comprehensive asset tax is 1.1 billion. So the means test of 33 million, that is too low of a standard. And economic hardship, when it comes suddenly. So that cutoff, having that cutoff for the assets, I hope that this can be taken away. And I did explain this in detail in my presentation, that all of the welfare system in Korea can lead to a dissolving of a family. So if a 4-household income receives 1 million and one individual household receives 40%, then if you get divorced, you can get 8%. So this is an inducement for dissolving of families. Therefore, it should be divided by N per person. So whether it is support to households or support to individual, there shouldn't be a difference. That's my design. And of course, the support itself is done by households. That's the difference. And that's an area that I would like to see improved, that there should not be a disincentive for households. But there are realistic issues, and so those are the two main differences. And starting at 85% or 100%, that is just looking at there is no difference in the inclination, but just the cutoff. But in any case, as I said in my presentation, the basic philosophy of safety income and the intent of safety income is all incorporated in SSIP, and it is being operated in that way. And I think that we can get some results from SSIP. And Professor Chung talked about the point that we have too many indexes, and we think about the marginal effect. If there is even a marginal effect for an individual, that might be a big impact, and that's why we included many indexes. And I talked about the individual household, and on the labor willingness and inducement, we understand that. That's correct. And when we started the study in 2019, the 2019 data was the most updated one, KWP data, and we used the 2019 data for analysis. Fortunately, the 2019 data, there wasn't the 30% labor deduction, labor income deduction. That's why I could use consistent data. So that was quite fortunate as a researcher. But in 2020, there are these different factors. So we'll have to consider that in the research and assessment. And SSIP, one great point about it is that EITC and labor inducement or facilitation benefit is maintained. Even if there is a 30% deduction, still there is a 20% point labor inducement factor. And so I think that this can resolve that issue that you pointed out. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Kim. So I will be brief. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Heikki Hiilamo for his question, and I think Professor Park just answered your question. And Dr. Oh made some comments about how can we compare and analyze safety income with the existing welfare system, and talked about questions in the survey. So if you look at the questionnaire, our baseline survey for SSIP, it looks at the employment panel, welfare panel, and it also looks like economic activity surveys. And we actually employ the same questions from the existing welfare systems or welfare system surveys. And Professor Soondool talked about performance evaluation. And so for you have a treatment group and a control group. And if you compare these groups in advance, the information you get can help you to get more accurate performance evaluation. And of course, there were tragic incidences in Seoul, and there are people, who have deaths or who need extra care and assistance. And so through those issues might be difficult just if you have a quantitative approach. But through qualitative approach, we are going to carry out in-depth interviews and identify issues that we were not able to through our quantitative approach. And there was also a comment about consumption pattern, and I think that we should try to reflect that more in the design of our research. And Professor Hong talked about the current welfare system and comparing that with SSIP. And if you look at the current welfare system, you have the basic pension program. It targets those who have 30% of standard median income. And the criteria is different. So if we analyze the participating households, there are people who are part of MBLS. About 35% were part of MBLSs, and 65% have never been part of MBLS. So of the 480 households, 35%, you could say, have made the shift to safety income. And if you look at the control group, we see similar ratio. About 35% have received benefits under MBLS. So that ratio, you can see, help us to analyze the impact of SSIP. So with that, I would like to conclude my remarks. Thank you very much. So do the discussants have any extra questions, or do we have any questions from the audience? And so those of you who are joining us on YouTube, you can also ask questions. So it seems that there are two people in the audience who want to ask a question. So we're going to give the person sitting in the front opportunity to ask the first question. So actually, before the audience asks a question, I, as a moderator, would like to ask a question. So you said from 500 households, you began with 500 households, and next year you said the number will be increased to 1,600 households. So the number of participating households will increase. If that happens, maybe the experiment model that you designed in the initial stage can be changed a little bit. So maybe there might be some adjustments made to your program. So Professor Park, maybe it might be a little bit different from the model that you initially designed. So maybe there might be some modifications to your model. And in the first session, we talked about German's basic income experiment. And in that presentation, he shared with us what we can evaluate through the experiment and what we can't find out through the experiment. So I think it was quite insightful to find out what you can't evaluate. So what's important is, of course, is evaluation. So what are we going to evaluate? Which indicators are we going to focus on as we evaluate the program? And what are the things that we can't find out through this experiment? So I think we need to clearly define this among experts as we conduct this experiment. So I would like to I asked this question to Mr. Kim. And I think the person who's asking the question is a member of the Health and Wealth Committee at Seoul Metropolitan City Council. So I hope the microphone is working. So I'm a member of Seoul Metropolitan Council, and the SSIP model I want it to be successful, so that is why I'm asking this question. And Professor Park, I was listening to your presentation. The presentation material was in English, so I couldn't check all the details. But one thing that came to my mind is that it seems that the outcome of SSIP seems very positive. But there are economic factors. For example, the economic situation, people are saying next year and the year after that is going to be bad. And many people are facing economic hardship. So there are more people who are experiencing economic hardship than before. So companies, rather than making more profit, they are redesigning or redefining their goals and trying to maintain status quo. So if this situation continues, then maybe that basic line that you set was based on the income level of last year. Then next year and the year after that, maybe you might have to readjust your baseline criteria. And the employment rate, I think, will go down. So there's all these external factors. And have you actually thought about all of these economic external factors? Because those external, in Seoul metropolitan government, we are investing a lot in the SSIP, and the outcome might be different from what we expect. And if we don't incorporate these external factors, even if the program is good, are my comments too long? Yes, we don't have a lot of time. So I'm just curious as to whether we'll be able to get the results that we want. We're in the design phase. I'm sure you've gone through the design phase, but did you also think about economic external factors? I'm sorry, my question was so long. So we'll take one more question. So we'll listen to the last question and then hear answers. So we have 3 minutes left. Can we spend more time, or do we only have 3 minutes? So thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. So you want me to stand up. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. So when I talk to my friends from abroad, Korea is part of G7 and Korea is a very advanced country. And they asked me, why is the suicide rate so high in Korea? So I was thinking about this question. But in Korea, there's social insurance program. And of course, the professor mentioned, there's a lot of these social security programs. But we see more blind spots being created in terms of welfare and so many incidences of suicide. So to address this program, we need basic income, safety income. We need a lot of alternatives. And I think you're making these alternative programs. But despite this, I think that you are not identifying the fundamental issue. So if you can make your question short. So an example might be, in Korea, there's a lot of programs, but if you look at the criteria for benefits, there are discrimination in terms of criteria, and people are turning a blind eye to this. So another example is, if you look at MBLS, the people who are applying for MBLS, as you mentioned before, there are different categories. So I think if you could just maybe ask the question rather than explain. So you're saying that the eligibility criteria for all of the program is different, right? Then we have 1 minute and 30 seconds left. Maybe we can use a minute more, but if you could answer the questions, Professor Park. Mr. Kim, so I'll answer first. So I will try to answer Professor Yu's question. So you were talking about how we have 2 times more people participating in the program. So I think you wanted us to compare our program to other programs. So I think in the Seoul Metropolitan Council, members have raised this issue, and many people have mentioned this. I think technically there are some difficulties, and if you look at the design of our program, it might be a little bit difficult to make these adjustments. And in Gyeonggi province, they also have a safety income program for the rural areas. So you have to look at the initial design of the research program. So changing or modifying this design in midway, you might get different results, or the results might not be intact. And then with regard to Germany's case study, I understand Professor Jürgen Schiff is the person who designed the basic income pilot project, and each country's program has different goals. For the Finnish model, they look at employment motivation. In the German Berlin model, they give 1,200 euro per person, and they want to see how people's behavior or lifestyle changes with this additional income. So that's what the experiment is all about. For SSIP, I would say that the purpose of SSIP is, in my opinion, I talked about the 7 different areas we look at, but the most important area would be, which is problematic right now, isolation and suicide due to isolation. So the areas of the blind spot, we want to see if we can address this through SSIP. And the second thing is, if we provide SSIP, what sort of changes it might bring to employment incentive.
So on the various experiments, we initially designed it to have 800 households, and 800 additional households were added, so we could take out the means test, or we could increase the SI benefit, but this was rejected by the city council. So we are talking about suicide, and some people, they were leading a pretty good life, and then suddenly there's a hardship, and this leads to suicide. So I believe that one of the basic responsibility of a government is to prevent suicides due to economic distress. And the council member Hwang made some comments, and we will have 8 rounds of assessment, and the economic situations will have to be put in as control variables, and the statistical economics will try to eliminate the control effect, and I'm sure that they will come up with solutions for that. Thank you. So the benefits are different by the welfare system. Yes, if the safety income is adopted, implemented, it will be a pan-welfare system. So it's like a coat that you're putting on people. It eliminates blind spots and fills in the gaps. We talked about Germany, and there's a mantle agreement, and the industry, when there is a large agreement, then based on that large agreement, it becomes a mantle for the other companies to follow. So when there's this big mantle, then the areas that have gaps will be filled in, and in that sense, it's a pan-welfare system. That's all for me. We would have liked to receive more questions and to give more time to our presenters to answer, but due to time constraint, we will have to end today's international forum here. We are talking about basic income and safety income and new welfare systems, and we are carrying out various experiments, and that is because the existing welfare system is very complicated. There are different benefits given out. There are many blind spots and inefficiencies. That is why there is a need to reform our current welfare system. And based on this understanding, we are discussing ways to find an alternative welfare system that is most realistic and optimal for Korean society. And we hope to see a welfare system that can be implemented well here in Korea. And I want to thank the participants, and also my thanks goes to our presenters and our discussants. We will now go on to the closing and wrap up.
So thank you very much. With this, we will conclude session 2. Once again, we would like to thank the moderator, the discussant, and the presenters for the valuable contribution. So please return to your seats. So I hope you found the discussion very rewarding and enjoyable. So next time, we hope there'll be more time for more questions and more discussions. I know that there were a lot of questions. So if you could also write down your questions on our survey, it would be greatly appreciated. So this brings us to the end of the Seoul International Forum on Safety Income 2022. So at our registration desk, there is a banner, and in your booklet, there is a QR code, and the QR code will connect you to our survey. So we hope that many of you will answer our survey. The Seoul International Forum on Safety Income will be held next year, and all of your feedback will be very valuable in preparing for next year's forum. Once again, all of the cups and containers that you use, please return to our information desk. So with this, we will conclude the Seoul International Forum on Safety Income. We look forward to your participation at the next forum. Thank you.